What do you think it means to be welcomed and to welcome? Today, we start a 4-week series through Acts chapter 10 called Culture Club, where we look at the changes to the culture of the early church and the tension and resistance that accompanied those changes. And today, we're going to look at the theme of welcome, God's welcome, and what it means for us to welcome others. Welcome and how we do it is crucial to the life of our church. How we welcome people is a direct reflection of our spiritual health and our understanding of God's welcome, how He has welcomed us. But in my experience, welcome and the expression of welcome is sometimes more of a platitude, a sentiment, a cliche, than it is a reality. Who doesn't on their church sign say, all welcome? But I don't think all churches mean all welcome. There is often an unwritten list of criteria for the kind of welcome that we're comfortable with. So a more honest sign might be most welcome, some welcome, or not accepting new members at this time. It's something to think about. And it begs the question, what does it mean to welcome? Do we really want to welcome people to our church, our community, to journey with us? Do we really? I'm not trying to be negative. I'm simply trying to understand what God would have for us in terms of welcome and moving towards that, and to honestly assess where my heart is at and where we are at. I know each of us, we want to be welcomed, so we should welcome others. Welcome and acceptance and belonging are close to our hearts and even to our self-esteem. It is very difficult to feel that you are not welcome. It's not a good feeling. And I'm sure you've experienced that feeling out of place or somewhere that you don't belong. And those experiences can range from the mildly irritating to the deeply wounding. I went into Costco once without a membership card. And to be clear, I do have a membership. I just didn't happen to have my card with me. I don't remember why, but I remember walking in, needing to see something, and this Costco employee came up to me, and honestly, she was quite worked up. Sir, can I see your membership? And I said, I don't have my card with me. It's like I'd been caught and guilty of something really bad. And this is what she said. This is a private club, sir. You'll have to leave. Well, I guess that's in the category of mildly irritating. Yet, even though it was a small thing, if I'm honest, I wanted to look around and see if anyone else noticed that I did not belong at Costco, and that I'd just been bounced out of Costco. Even though it was a small thing, and I actually had a membership, and it was really a very small consequence to my life. It was embarrassing, and I didn't like it. Ever since that day, I've stopped eating Costco hot dogs in protest to punish them. But more serious is the lack of welcome that makes us feel that we are just not wanted. You know what I mean? I went to a church once in a town that I was new to. I was just visiting for my first time, and the sign said, all welcome. So I thought, well, that's a good start. It must be true. I went in, no one said hi to me, not one person. It was like I was invisible, like I didn't exist. They looked at me and then quickly looked away, like it was too awkward to look at me. So I thought, well, I'll just do what people do. I'll grab a bulletin and sit down and read it. What else are you going to do when you don't know anyone and no one seems interested in knowing you? So I took the bulletin and sat down. There was hardly anyone there. So I was sitting, reading the bulletin, pretending I was interested, totally engrossed in the details. Picnic next Sunday, all welcome. Piano fundraiser, donate now. Coming up, spaghetti dinner to raise money for the pastor's salary. Well, to my relief, when I just couldn't stand reading anymore, people started coming in. It was getting close to time for the service to start. But then an older couple came in. When they walked into the sanctuary, the first thing they did was look at me, kind of held my gaze. And I thought, they're going to come say hi to me. But the look turned from curiosity to irritation. And they came up to me and said, "Excuse me, you're sitting in our spot." They wanted me to get up and move. So I did. It was actually really embarrassing. And the message I received was that guests and newcomers actually were not welcome. I was not welcome. I did not matter. Well, I never went back there. And I'm sure each of us have felt something like this in our lives. But the thing is, our culture, who we think we are, who we like, what we are used to, the things we do can very effectively keep people out rather than welcome them in. In the book of Acts, chapter 10, we have someone who doesn't really belong being welcomed in. His name is Cornelius. He's a Roman soldier. It's actually a really interesting story. He's regarded as the first non-Jew to become a disciple of Jesus, all in a climate of the church not really wanting to welcome him. He doesn't fit. He's an outsider. This is part of his story, and we find it in Acts chapter 10, in which April just read, but I'd like to read it again just to get it really in so we can hear the story. In Caesarea, there lived a Roman officer named Cornelius, who was a captain of the Italian regiment. He was a devout, God-fearing man, as was everyone in his household. He gave generously to the poor and prayed regularly to God. One afternoon, about 3 o'clock, he had a vision in which he saw an angel of God coming towards him. "Cornelius," the angel said. Cornelius stared at him in terror. "What is it, sir?" he asked the angel. And the angel replied, "Your prayers and gifts to the poor have been received by God as an offering. Now send some men to Joppa and summon a man named Simon Peter. He is staying with Simon, a tanner who lives near the seashore." As soon as the angel was gone, Cornelius called 2 of his household, a servant and a devout soldier, and one of his personal attendants. And he told them what had happened and sent them off to Joppa. He told them what had happened. Well, what did happen? What did he tell them? "Hey, I had a vision. I was given a message. We need to find Simon Peter." Those are all things that did happen in his vision. Those were his instructions. That is true. Yet on another level, if we shift perspective a bit from what is happening to who it's happening to, that's when it starts to get very interesting. Very interesting, challenging, even disturbing for a first century Jewish Christian. And remember, that's all there were up to this point, Jewish Christians. They were the church. There were only Jewish followers of Jesus. If you were a Jewish Christian reading or hearing this, I'm sure you would miss the what and focus on the who. You would not be so interested in what is happening, but who is it happening to would jump right out at you. You might not even notice the details of the message, none of what would matter to you, because you'd be so fixated on one thing, the who. Sorry, wait, did I read that right? A message of God from God, the God of Israel, given to, wait for it, a Gentile? Get out of town. And that's got to be a typo. Gentiles don't receive messages like this. They don't belong. You might think I'm overstating this, so let me give you a bit of a background. The Christian church was formed around the original disciples and followers of Jesus, and all of them were Jewish. Jesus was Jewish. The prophecies, the hopes, the expectations came from the journey and history and experiences of the Jewish people journeying with God. From Abraham to Moses, the patriarchs to the judges, David to the prophets, to the expectation of Messiah. It was steeped in the tradition of Israel and the Jewish people. This meant that the first disciples of Jesus observed the law of Moses. And because of that, they were all circumcised. So this whole thing, historically, the inclusion of Gentiles sparked a debate among the leaders of the early church. Should they allow Gentiles into the church? And if they did, should they allow them in without making them conform to the law of Moses? The early church was Jewish, for Jewish people. It wasn't for Gentiles. It wasn't for outsiders. It wasn't for Romans. They were not welcome. But Cornelius did receive the message. It was very difficult for the Jewish Christians to accept because it went against their culture. It went against who they thought could belong and who couldn't. It went against who they thought were qualified to be members of the church. Cornelius was not part of the culture of the Jewish Christians. He was an outsider. The sign on the synagogue didn't even say all welcome. They weren't even pretending. Maybe it would have said all Jews welcome and the rest of you can watch. Maybe it's not surprising to us at First Baptist Kelowna that this message would come to a Gentile Roman soldier, because we're used to the idea of multiculturalism. We're used to this idea that the gospel isn't only for the Jews. So why not come to a Roman? We are very far removed from the Jewishness of Christianity, from the Jewish origins. We don't really think this way. Our values, our cultures, miss those details because we come from so many different backgrounds. But not so for Cornelius. He was the first for the Christian church. He was the first Christian Gentile. So, for the early Jewish Christians hearing or reading this story, the who of the message stuck out more than the what of the message. Who it was given to was more of a problem than what the message was. Cornelius, a Gentile, a Roman centurion? Now that is a problem. Maybe it's a mistake, a typo, something that was misspoken, because Gentiles, Romans, were not part of God's people. They were not Hebrews, Israelites, Jewish. He was not welcome. Sir, Cornelius, this is a private club. If he went into the synagogue, he would definitely be told he was sitting in someone else's spot. The inclusion of Cornelius is a radical departure from the expectation of who belongs and who is welcome in the church. So to break it down, he had a number of things against him, a number of strikes, 3 strikes actually, which means he should be out, not in. Strike number 1, he's a Gentile. To the Jews, the world was divided into 2 categories, Jews and all the rest. If you're not Jewish, you were Gentile. And the people who were blessed were the Jews. And if you were not blessed, you were the rest. They were wrong in that, but that was the expectation. That was the culture. It seemed so clear to them, so scriptural, so orthodox. Strike number 2, Cornelius is a Roman soldier. A Roman soldier? How could it be worse than this? The Romans were the oppressors. They were the colonial power, and he worked for them. He made his living enforcing Roman law. They must have just wondered what in the world was going on. Definitely, this had to be a mistake. Maybe, just maybe, God was unaware of what was going on down here in Jerusalem, in Caesarea. Strike number 3, Cornelius is uncircumcised. Not only is he a Gentile, the non-Jew and a Roman soldier, but he is also uncircumcised. He doesn't follow the law of Moses. How could he be part of the people when this was their sign? Circumcision is a big deal to the Jews. It was a ritual that set them apart. It goes all the way back to Abraham. God made a covenant with Abraham that his people would be set apart. And one of the signs of them being set apart was circumcision. It was normally done on the 8th day of a newborn son's life, but if you're converted as an adult, you need to get it done. Cornelius did not fit in. He was not set apart. He didn't make the cut. He should not be welcomed. So those three things, he was a Gentile, he was a Roman soldier, he was uncircumcised, were why the Jewish Christians who first read this or heard this news would have been completely sidetracked by the who of the story. The what was interesting enough, if it happened to be the right person doing it, but it wasn't. It was Cornelius, and he did not belong. He was not a member. He was an outsider. He was not welcome. Yet God, through Jesus and the Holy Spirit, had a different idea of who is welcome in the church than those of the early church did. And we say, thanks be to God. God had a different plan than those early Christians who couldn't see beyond their culture or their own expectations. He is a God of surprise. When we think we have him figured out, he defies us. He is beyond categorization. He's beyond us telling him who belongs and who doesn't. This story, the vision of Cornelius, it's more than just a story about an uncircumcised Gentile Roman soldier receiving a message from God and being included in what God is doing. It's about God welcoming the unwelcome into his church. You know, the Jewish people kept missing this. Actually, the people of Israel kept missing this. Even going back to Abraham, God said right from the beginning that the good news wasn't for privilege, for status, for exclusivity. The good news wasn't for them to keep for themselves. The good news wasn't a private blessing. The good news was a blessing that was to be shared. The people of God, right from the time of Abraham, were blessed not so that they could be a private club, but so that they could bless others. There's a foundational verse in Genesis for our theology of mission and the expansion of God's people. It's in Genesis 12, verses 1-3. This is God speaking to Abraham. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Abraham, you are blessed to be a blessing. You are a people, so make a people for my name. You have received grace and mercy to extend grace and mercy. God's people needed to be reminded of this again and again. There are so many points in Scripture where this is pointed out, but one in particular is the whole book that is devoted to this point. It's the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth is about God bringing people in, removing walls, destroying barriers, welcoming, and making room. You might know the story. It's about a young lady named Ruth, who was from a land called Moab. She left her own land in tragic fashion and ended up marrying a man named Boaz, a Hebrew man of status. And according to the law and custom of God's people, he was not supposed to do so. He did not intermingle with outsiders, yet he does. And yet, this book, the whole book of Ruth, functions to display God's welcome to those on the outside. The book of Ruth displays the trajectory of God's welcome. God's welcome gets wider and wider, as does this story and the book of Acts. Until in the book of Acts, even Gentile, uncircumcised Roman soldiers are included and welcomed. God's people need to be reminded again and again that the message is not for private gain and private membership into a club with exclusive benefits. Do we today need to be reminded of that? Do we remember? Do we remember that we, like Cornelius, only belong because of grace and mercy that has been extended to us? Do we remember that we are blessed to be a blessing, not to keep it for ourselves? Have you ever been on the receiving end of not being welcomed? Have you ever felt like you needed to show your membership card just to keep your seat? Have you ever felt excluded, unwanted, like you do not belong? It's not a good feeling. I want to say something very basic. Based on this message, we should extend the same grace and mercy to others that has been extended to us. None of us are good enough. Yet, by God's grace, we belong because we don't need to be good enough. That's the good news, the gospel. And the simple, basic message is this: do to others as you would have them do to you. Do unto others. First Baptist Kelowna isn't my church. It's not your church. It's Christ's body that we belong to. We do not have the right to create a private members-only club out of our church because it is God's church. We are Christ's body. So we, as Christ's body, are called to demonstrate and proclaim the gospel, the good news of the kingdom, and to extend God's wide, radical welcome to those who are popular, to those who are unpopular, to those who don't belong, so that they can belong, to those who are used to being excluded, so that they can be included, and to all because God is creating a people for his name that defies our culture and our boundaries and our sense of self-righteousness. And how dare we withhold God's welcome and keep God's work for ourselves? Whew, well, that's kind of heavy. And I know, but there is joy in this. It's the joy of making room. It's the joy of welcome. It's the joy of hospitality. It's the joy, metaphorically, and maybe one day soon, practically, of giving up your seat for a newcomer. It's the joy of not asking someone for their membership card, but welcoming them in, even if they don't have a card. The who starts with you. It starts with us. God is creating a people for his name. Let's extend God's radical welcome and watch what he does in and through us. You are welcome. You, we, I need to welcome others. Let us be a people of welcome, as Jesus was a person welcome. The tax collectors and sinners, the outsiders and unwelcome, all gathered around Jesus to hear him, and he welcomed them. The Pharisees and the self-righteous muttered, "The man welcomes sinners and eats with them." First Baptist Church, may we be less like the Pharisees and the self-righteous. May we be more like Jesus. May we be a people of welcome as Jesus was. Amen.